Welcome back. I'm glad you're still with us here on Morning at NTV. If you are just joining us, it's time for the Kickstarter, a discussion of the issues that are making headlines today and over the last few days. As we speak, the tension in the Democratic Republic of Congo is high, especially after the advancement of the M23 rebels onto Goma and threats that they could be going further and targeting the city of Kisangani. What we do know also is that the embassies of Uganda, Kenya, Rwanda and South Africa were attacked by protesters in the capital Kinshasa on account of what they say is the meddling into Congolese affairs by actors or agents of these countries. The conflict in the Democratic Republic of Congo is not new, and the latest escalation is one that maybe could have been expected, especially in light of the unresolved issues that the president of the Democratic Republic of Congo, Felix Tshisekedi, has been talking about. He accuses particularly Paul Kagame of Rwanda of directly funding the M23 into subversive activities that are threatening the security of the Democratic Republic of Congo. On the other hand, Rwanda and other parties that do support or think the M23 have a cause say the rights of the Tutsi in the Democratic Republic of Congo must be observed and that they are bona fide citizens within that country. But what does it mean for the latest escalation? With me in the studios, I have on my extreme left Timothy Kalyegira. He's an international relations expert and a seasoned commentator. Many thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
I also have with me Dr. Allawi Ssemanda. He's also an international relations expert. Many thanks for making time for Morning at NTV.
Thank you.
And on my immediate left, I have Hadijjah Natasha Sebunya, Foreign Policy Analyst, joining us for the very first time on Morning at NTV. You are welcome.
Thank you.
Great. Let me begin with Timothy Kalyegira. In light of events being described in some circles as a diplomatic earthquake, one that speaks of the significance of the Congo to the African question. There are aspects on why this particular conflict is never ending that has been attributed to the fact that maybe the mineral question in the Congo that brings in all actors from across the globe should be looked at, other than seeing it entirely as a political problem. How do you see these things?
What, the immediate overrunning of Goma or the wider story? What am I answering?
Can we look at the wider issue, but particularly what this latest escalation means to what we know to be a long-standing dilemma for the region?
Well, still, not too sure what I'm answering, but if it's about the latest advances, things we've been here before. The start of this was, of course, in October 1996, when a combined force of Uganda and Rwanda supporting rebels from the 1960s, the Laurent Kabilas, advanced on a weak state at that time called Zaire. And in a few months, between October and May 1997, had removed the 32-year-old government of Mobutu Sese Seko. And for those who are old enough to remember, every few days it was rebels at the border, 2-3 days later it's Kisangani, then 4 days later it's Lubumbashi. That's how weak Congo was. So we've been there before. In other words, at some point rebels moved from the border and took power in Kinshasa. But then, later, partly because of, I guess, human rights atrocities and also plundering of Congo, the appetite changed. Now people saw that these occupiers were actually quite, like malicious. So in 1998, in August, when Uganda and Rwanda, once again, having fallen out with Kabila, tried to do a repeat of October 1996, this time Angola, Zimbabwe, Namibia, and some of those other countries said, no, we will not allow one such thing again. So they came in force and halted the Uganda-Rwanda advance, and that's when began the so-called the Congo War of the 90s. So this latest is going to be just one of those things. The pattern we've seen over the last...
It's an episode in a series.
Yes, where M23 or REB was... before M23, there was, remember, Laurent Nkunda's, I think, CNDD or something. The advance, when they advance, it makes world news. When it makes world news, stirs up global concern and anger. Pressure comes on the rebel group, especially with what's presumed to be their funder, Rwanda. And then it's halted, like what you've been hearing last night. The UN Security Council, the US Secretary of State, the new Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, tells President Paul Kagame to halt all advances by M23 immediately. Even China, that's normally a neutral country, or leans slightly toward the third world, also says, Rwanda must stop all this. So basically, they're predictable all over again. They're going to get stuck in Goma. Pressure, Germany has announced, I think it's suspending all aid discussions with Rwanda. So once again, same old thing, advance, stop, then get humiliated, then blame the West's imperialism. And
well, one would say this is the latest episode in a series of events that everybody pretty much knows about. But the fact that it has taken on a more diplomatic prong maybe does signal that this particular problem must be dealt with at a higher level than simply leaving it to the regional powers. And if you don't mind, Dr. Allawi, the fact that Timothy says, and authoritatively so, Germany, China are being pulled into this and having to come out loudly, excuse me, having to come out loudly, it hasn't been so in the past. And this means maybe it's about time that the global powers take a little bit more attention into resolving this particular conflict than they have in the past.
Well, thank you very much. First of all, I don't believe that Germany's decision would make any significant influence in Congo. First of all, Germany is a failing force now. It cannot speak, and they really listen to them. They will listen to them on a from a diplomatic perspective, not because they are threatening to whip, because they no longer have any stick that they can use, especially under the current leadership. But if we look at the international leaders,
Europe's largest economy.
If we look, it's the Europe's largest economy, but today the projections are it is really failing.
Okay.
You see,
that's a debate for another day. Not
yes.
about it.
Yeah.
It still has the power or not, but within the context here.
Yeah. And when we go to the other international powers, the coming in of China, the US, these are countries, and France and the United Kingdom, these are countries that I see would put a bit of pressure. But also let's look at who are the advisors of the country being accused of intervening in the DRC. If you look at the Presidential Advisory Council of Rwanda, I'm not saying Rwanda is responsible, I'm just quoting what the international experts in the UN are telling us. If you look at the advisors, are key decision makers in Washington, in London. So them speaking, unless they mean it, and it's a matter of making a phone call to the people they are accusing and say, please, if you don't do this, we really will not move with you. But about 3 years back, Beijing appointed a special representative of China to the Horn of Africa and the Great Lakes region. And I think from that, China has been trying to move because they see they have interest like other major powers. So a Congo, Democratic Republic of Congo, which is not stable, affects them. But if I go to the Rwanda, the country they are choosing, I have listened to Rwandese officials speaking, and if you speak with some of them, they definitely have genuine reasons. They have genuine reasons. And look, Rwanda benefits so much in a stable Democratic Republic of Congo. Many rich Congolese traders or people who are doing business in Congo, in evening they cross with millions of their money to bank it in Rwandan banks. So if Congo is stable, it means the country is making money, and then the neighboring country, which is Rwanda in this case, is able to benefit from that kind of the business boom. So unstable DRC means that Congo's interests in one or the other are not met. but also the people who, as of now, I know there are other underlying causes, but if you look at, for example, the Banyamulenge, those the Rwandese people, but who are Congolese in the region, who Democratic Republic of Congo thinks they are not citizens. Yeah. Really, you can see these people cannot be stateless, because remember, as a result of colonial demarcations, those guys who demarcated our countries and said, you pass here, partly they had to blame. But now this is already done, we cannot avoid it. If you ask President Tshisekedi, I have seen President Kagame, President Ruto saying, we have asked them, are these people Rwandese? He says, no, many of them were born here, their grandparents are here, so why don't you accept? And DRC choosing to run away from Uganda, from Kenya, from East Africa, these are the neighboring countries that I think have a great role they can play in stabilizing or helping this country to stabilize. Of course, all of these countries have interest, but when you run away from them and you think that you will manage this situation, I think, respect to President Tshisekedi and his advisors, the worst, better if he would fire them. And look, the South Africans who are there now telling us they are going to keep peace, even the MOU they signed clearly tells you they have gone to neutralize supporters of the M23 and those against the Democratic Republic of Congo. Of course, South Africans also have interest. So in this regard, and I remember about 2022 when the DRC was accepted in East African community. I mentioned it here with you. I said, I think it was too early to accept the DRC because the politicians in Kinshasa seem not to know what their country is interested in. Sometimes you've got to accept and say, you compromise for the best of your people. But from where I stand, I think politicians in the DRC, they don't really matter. They don't mind about their people. It's about themselves, or they are politicians by accident.
That's an interesting submission. Politicians by accident who don't care about their people. That is, well, subjective. Later, I'll be returning to Timothy and ask, what is this whole cocktail, Tutsi in DRC, Hutu in DRC, Banyamulenge in DRC, and why Rwanda must and is embedded in all this interest as accused by Kinshasa. But allow me engage Madame Hadijjah Natasha Sebunya as a foreign policy analyst. Or this whole thing right now is taking on a diplomatic face that hasn't happened as it's happening right now. And maybe some elements would say if the diplomatic powers were involved at an earlier stage, maybe solutions would have been sought. But that is not to say that diplomats always have the solutions. As you see things right now, what ought to be done to find a lasting solution to what is no doubt a deeply seated problem?
I feel like you've asked me a very tough question. I fear to comment on this issue because I feel like you have to be on ground, you have to speak the language, and you have to understand the complexities, and you have to have like the long-term history like Kalyegira has. But I do understand that getting His Excellency Felix and Kagame to talk is part of the situation, because those two are very aggressive people, and a huge part of this escalation has happened because of their conversations and their personalities. This morning I saw that Kagame has said that he would like to sit down with and negotiate with Trump at the table, so maybe there's something to talk about that situation. With M23, of course, there was a UN report that cited human rights violations, that talked about minerals being taken and all those issues indicting Rwanda. And we saw today that the people of Congo are speaking because they are attacking the embassies of Rwanda and the people who they believe should be reigning Rwanda in. They don't believe that Rwanda's allies are being strong enough, and they're talking to Rwanda. Some more radical people are saying that Rwanda is behaving like a client state in the same manner that Israel was behaving with Palestine, and going back to invade and encroach on the territories of another country. So I feel like maybe we should look forward to what happens if Trump can get Mr. Paul Kagame and Mr. Felix to sit on a table and to talk. But I think de-escalation is the best solution. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Trump being a mediator in this appears
I don't know.
like a long shot. No doubt about it. He's not the kind of world leader who has shown great interest in resolving African conflicts, especially given what his sentiments about African leaders are. But let me get back to you, Timothy. The underlying or foundational issues here are about ethnicity and ethnogenesis. The fact that there is a multiplicity of tribes that have a connection to cross-border tribes, and they still want to stay connected in a way. I do not know whether Felix Tshisekedi has a problem about a Tutsi or a Hutu being a citizen of the Democratic Republic of Congo. I do believe, and this one is subject to debate, that he thinks that those who have power across the border are using the interconnectedness to advance their own interests, and this is aggression.
You've actually answered the question you asked me, and that's what I've been asking a few of these people, the unreminded types. What's the fear? Why does Congo behave that way? Well, let's just look at it from the point of view of the Kinshasa government. They've had, as we know, it's like another Cameroon, multiple ethnic cities, but then it's basically the genesis of all this is back to Uganda, 1985. Or if you want, you can say the attack on Kabamba, 1981.
The attack on Kabamba.
Yes, these revolutionaries, one of whose name I will not mention, but the one who led the attack on Kabamba in 1981, tricky people. And the starting point was 40 years ago, when the Milton Obote government is overthrown. Tito Okello is the new military head of state, and then there begins what we now know as the Nairobi peace process. And so, the military government, in good faith, tries to incorporate the Musevenis, the NRA, into this joint government. Actually, the true beginning of what you call a broad-based government. But the reality was the NRA was just going through the motions, buying time, and eventually they abrogate the Nairobi peace agreement of December 1985 and come to take power in 1986. And then 4 years later, they support a breakaway faction of the NRA, now called the RPA, to go into Rwanda. What was the pretext? Once again, the same story. There have been these refugees in Uganda since 1959. They were right to go back to their country and all that there. And then they begin this Arusha peace process to integrate the RPA into the national army and do what they would have done with Uganda. And once again, a pretext, and eventually the RPF takes power in Rwanda. So then, of course, 2 years later, the story I told you earlier of Congo, the Kabilas, fronted by Rwanda and Uganda. So basically, from the point of view of Kinshasa, it's that these two meddlesome countries, Uganda and Rwanda, have an agenda to create what the media in the late 80s, 90s used to call the Hutu-Tutsi empire, that general cliche that you might have heard about. So the idea is these two people, these tricky people, Museveni and Kagame, have that agenda. So the pretext, of course, is just the same as the Hitler's invasion of Poland in 1939, the beginning of the Second World War. Yeah, these German ethnicities in Czechoslovakia and Austria who are being harassed, and they're asking for help. The World War stories. So that's the fear of the Tshisekedis. Basically use these, the ethnic Tutsi and ethnic Hutu as a pretext to then remove the government in Kinshasa. That's their main fear. And as I said, the pattern I've been narrating from the peace talks is these people don't keep their word. So that's, I guess, the general argument.
There has been an element of trust, or a lack of it for that matter, especially when it comes to these negotiations. And maybe that could be the reason why Felix Tshisekedi thinks that the inability for some leaders to be as honest as they ought to be. But I don't see, for example, Rwanda that could have interests that are divergent or go beyond ethnicity or the relation to people on the other side of the border and come out openly to say, I think in light of that, we also want a little bit of the minerals that are there. We could use them to buffer our own economy. Because at the end of the day, usually tend to disregard the debate on the minerals, but that also is a very potent reason as to why these wars are there. Everyone wants a bit of what is available, especially within the vacuum of a lack of governance. Let me first engage Natasha on this. A lack of governance in itself within this part of the world has largely left a vacuum that anybody would want to use. Yesterday, I was speaking to Felix Kalyegira, now acting Major General, and a few other gentlemen, and there was an analogy that was put forward. If you have a banana plantation in your compound, and then there is a wall that separates you with your neighbor, and then this plant in a way grows to have the actual banana on the other side, one of you could actually claim the benefits that come with that particular plant. It depends on how aggressive each one of you. Now, Rwanda is one that is aggressive and wants to take advantage of the fact that there is a leaning fruit and it wants to take a bit of it. The minerals, it's a potent issue that has to be discussed. Do you think it has been sidelined?
I don't think it's...
Or there is pretense that it's not the issue?
In all the conversations that I've been a part of, the minerals comes first. In fact, everyone accuses everyone of wanting the minerals. Even South Africa has recently been accused of being there just for the minerals. Yeah. And I think for Rwanda's argument is, I think their argument is that if everyone is taking minerals, you know, then why can't we take minerals? Because going back to like the understanding of Germany back then when it was annexing Poland is that, I mean, we have people who are like us over there, they're being persecuted and stuff like that. It's our neighbor, we should also be taking advantage of these minerals. And people say that yeah, so it's actually the forefront of the conversation is minerals. Everyone that I speak to speaks about minerals, and people benefit from there being a vacuum, because if you are aggressive enough, if you have enough if you have a strong man or as a warlord, you're able to access minerals. Yes,
that is right. Because I insist on that, because to continue to attempt to discuss the sociological aspects of this is some dead-end debate, especially for a man like me and many of you. When we do know, for example, that yesterday as Goma, or rather Sunday morning, as Goma was being overrun by the M23, there was a section in a suburb that was untouched, where the installations are, where coltan and other minerals are loaded onto planes. And it was clear, no rebels attack that place, no government forces attack that place. It's as if there is an understanding that you fight your own battles there, do not encroach on this. And it's important, Dr. Allawi, that the world begins to discuss this issue for what exactly it is. I do not know whether the likes of Mark Zuckerberg and all these tech oligarchs, so to speak, are willing, because for them they are entrepreneurs and they are benefiting from the minerals that come from the Congo. The world wants Congo disorganized as it is, so that that trade can go on.
Agree, and we have allowed the world, we Africans, and that is very unfortunate, because I strongly believe that as Africans, African leaders, if the leadership in Kinshasa is willing, we can find a solution. And first of all, we are talking about honesty. What kind of dialogue are you talking about where a principal, a major actor is not involved? Tshisekedi says, we can talk, but not talking, don't invite M23. You can't, because you are eliminating a key factor in the ongoing conflict. But if you take me back to the question of the minerals, and again we saw the mercenaries who were guarding from Poland, from other, faraway foreign countries. What is their interest? Clearly, as you've put it, these are the minerals of the DRC. So, because we have failed to know, I mean the Congolese people, now I'm speaking as an African.
As an African, yeah.
We have failed to know what our interests are. And even if Trump, as someone has alluded, that he's interested in helping, I don't believe, because his interest would be, as you've clearly put it, American tech companies having full access to these resources. And but to think that it is the main reason why Rwanda is involved, then let's solve the issues Rwanda is raising, such that Rwanda has no reason to give. Because you're failing to address these social issues, which we are trying to say that they are so minor, it keeps giving them a reason. So let's solve this issue. you're failing to solve the issue, it also means that you are also an agent. You are interested in the war going, because it will keep giving them a reason to say, hey, we are going to there to protect these people. And again, at this time, the world cannot accept apartheid, as we've seen, the genocide, as we've seen what was happening in Gaza. The interesting part is what is happening in the DRC. Major media is silent about it, the international media.
Just a brief question. This argument,
a question to Dr. Allawi.
In general, yes. This, or at least the point, this argument about Rwanda's interest in the Congo situation, because ethnic, groups in Congo related to Rwanda have been persecuted, denied their citizenship and all that. For the last 2 years, there's been a similar complaint in Uganda by what they call, is it Bavandum or something? These Ugandan Banyarwanda who've been complaining about being denied national IDs and passports and all this. It's been going on, and led by the Fanga Shumas and others. How come Rwanda hasn't, said anything about that? Ugandan too? How come Rwanda hasn't invaded Uganda? This is obvious.
How come they're not concerned?
How come they're not saying
the Tutsis in Uganda?
Exactly. How come basically, if see what I'm trying to explain, if what's happening in Congo is the excuse for Rwanda supporting them, then how come openly, as I said, it's not even as if there's been a short of meetings, endless public news, front page, with the Rwanda of Uganda being denied our national IDs and all this and our passports.
Ideally, that would be a good reason for Kagame to...
How come he did not forget that he didn't invade Uganda, which he should have, but no comment, no nothing. So, in other words, that's what I'm trying to say. That alone then kills the excuse of we're in Congo because of our citizens.
Maybe,
so
maybe he can clarify.
First of all, I believe here the Rwandese are fairly treated, other than what they vote. The Kashumbas have, and I don't like to front him as a defender of Rwandese here.
He has come to the forefront.
No, but still, at least, amass a few Rwandan troops at the border. No. Say something.
I don't think, and that is trivializing the issue which Rwanda is advancing. Because here, Rwandese, they are in schools, they go to hospitals, they access basic services. In the DRC, those services are not there. The few which are there, the government does not really recognize them. At least here they freely go and vote. They are here driving, they have buildings.
True, yes, true, but symbolically, that symbolism of, it's a bit like what happened to the Jews when the Nazis took over. Yes, they remain there, symphonies, university professors, Albert Einsteins, but then passports taken away. That thing called citizenship, even if you're allowed to go, party, do your business, that fact alone of you have been denied your citizenship is a very insecure and symbolic matter.
Yeah. It kind of pits the world against you. You're waiting. There's something going to happen in the next few years.
It's a bit like this sword that the government hangs over, let's say, the Daily Monitor all the time. It's like we're always one story away from being closed. Yes, you can say, yes, no, but you operate and you can come in. But that thought of you don't know which story it's going to be is a very terrible. So you can't say that, they're allowed to ABCD. Because I've been seeing, like on social media, I see some of those, the Banyamulenge and others, they kind of enjoy themselves tweeting from inside Congo, hey, look our boys advancing and all this. In other words, we've been through this before. Like I told you, the history of the RPA and NRA, when you go back through it, you can just see the plot. And as I said, the worry of the Tshisekedi is that being there before, that's what you do. Excuses, pretexts, come in. You remember at first Rwanda was even completely denying it was supporting the M23. As like the way the M70 government was denying in 1991 that was supporting the RPA. In other words, and that's why wisely of these world powers, they don't pretend. Okay, yes, you can deny it. China says, Rwanda, please hold M23. The US has stopped that because, well, these people have satellites, they have intelligence services. At the world level, we know about this. We know about deniability in diplomacy. You're not talking to kindergarten children, so that's my view.
It's unfortunate and absurd that as all this is going on, we have to attempt to find a way out on what can be in terms of solutions. But Natasha, When you look at the Congo, the DRC itself, I was earlier looking at the map of North and South Kivu, and there's a gentleman who chose to be a little bit cocky about the fact that a country as large as the Democratic Republic of Congo was whining about a country as small as Rwanda. But that's on the lighter note. We all know that it's not about the geography or how big one or how small one country is. Rwanda alone is just but a single, smaller than a single province in most of these, rather most of the provinces that I see. And North Kivu.
Just sorry. Rwanda and Burundi can fit in
Kivu.
In Buganda.
Oh.
Forget Uganda.
Geographically,
yeah. Those Rwanda
and Burundi fit in Buganda.
Yes, Buganda. So that's how it's starting there. Before you talk about Congo.
You know? So the dynamics here is you could perhaps understand the sentiment in Kinshasa that a country as small as this has the ability to, you know, like a mosquito that makes its way into the net, to cause a lot of commotion and, you know, discomfort through the night.
So there's an analyst who also made a joke and then said that we're calling them M23 rebels.
Yep.
But then when you go and look at their uniforms and how much resources they have, it looks like a national army that's attacking that small area.
It looks like a standing army.
And then also, like, to know about the DRC is that, like, there's some places, I have a friend from DRC and he lives from a certain region, and he says there's some places he doesn't go to because of how large it is and because there's no transportation to get across.
That is right.
So despite its vastness, it doesn't mean it's accessible, and it's so fragmented and there's so much insecurity that it's not, you know, that a small organized entity that's well funded and well resourced and well organized can establish something and can actually destabilize a small region just like that. So they're valid, and also it's very well funded. If the accusations are correct, it's funded by Rwanda, and Rwanda has good funding from all these allies that it has. Yeah.
Should we blame Rwanda?
For the lack of governance
in the Democratic
DRC.
Republic of Congo has failed to take good care of its soldiers, to train them, to give them uniform, to give them food. Should we blame Rwanda really? I think at the end, problem goes back to the leadership in Kinshasa that has all these kind of resources but has failed to use them for the benefit of its population, waiting to complain about the neighboring
Clarify on that, Natasha.
But it's not a blame game, really. We all know that DRC has a problem. I mean, DRC has had a problem longer than all of us have had a problem. They did have good leaders, but you know what happened to Lumumba. So I mean, it's like it's not their fault. It's like they're citizens, they're people, they're your neighbors, they're human beings. It's not their fault if they don't have an army. I mean, it's in good conscience as an East African, as a Pan-African, to say that I won't invade my brother, that I won't participate in I won't participate in the destabilization. You know, that we should be protecting them just in the same manner that Angola, Zimbabwe, and SADC were trying to do when we first invaded them. It's not their fault if they don't have. I mean, should we invade everyone that doesn't have an army?
That's true. Somalia was once in 1972 when Uganda and Tanzania had the clashes. Somalia was once a mediator between Uganda and Tanzania. In 1991, in January, Somalia falls apart. Do you say what? Therefore, and also this argument. You know, there's a spin factory on behalf of Kigali that is not very sure what he wants to say. One part of it is ethnic Tutsi are threatened, that's why. Two, look at Congo, very disorganized army. And as I've been arguing a few days ago on X, I said, but if that's the case, what explains the rapid advance of Nazi Germany into Western Europe at the beginning of the Second World War, overrunning France, Denmark, Holland, and all the highly organized countries? Then I also asked another question. I said, India, as you know, computer, you know, hub, big economy, space. They have had this Maoist rebellion since 1967. If India has failed to put down this Maoist rebellion, India that we know, why do we get too hard on Congo? No, Turkey, that produces these drones that you see, Turkey with all these airlines, you know, Turkey, that NATO country, has been fighting the PKK, Turkish rebels since 1978. You know? So in other words, I can see the attempt of, you see the incompetence of Congo. So that's...
Maybe all that drives to the governance question of the Democratic Republic of Congo, because let's cut some slack here for a president as in the position of Felix Tshisekedi. You sit in Kinshasa, which is arguably more than 1,500 miles away from Goma. You probably don't know what happens in the middle of the country, because it's a dense forest. And if you're to get to Goma, you simply fly over this dense forest and come to Goma. In other words, the Congo and most of its provinces have largely operated independently over time. The fact that they are the rather look to Kinshasa is simply being polite and saying, okay, let's operate like we are, but we can actually stand alone and, for example, be nation states. I would, for example, not be surprised if at any one point in time DR Congo is divided into 6 nations. That would ease the governance question, but that is not something that I'm proposing. I'm not even a scholar to begin to want. I'm only trying to think loudly about that.
Should Kenya have invaded? Okay, all these years, Karamoja was, full of rustlers and all this. Should Kenya have said, so let's invade Karamoja and take over because Uganda's failed? Should, if everything's about these countries and well-governed, do neighbors, do we all invade Iraq after Saddam Hussein? Is that the answer?
Special interest.
Complaining as we are the
No, but they were disorganizing tests.
Yeah, because today we see that those people, the Tutsis, the Banyamrenges, they are complaining. Clearly, you can see that they are not happy. So the other, you give a reason in the other country because it feels these people are crying, so we should defend them.
NOP supporters are also complaining right now in Uganda. Shouldn't Rwanda also invade Uganda?
That is trivializing this because Rwanda
it's actually trivial, like I said.
What I realize, and gentlemen, I'll be very candid with this. What I realize is that all stakeholders are actually saying somebody's playing us. And for us to continue to go on and about trying to find what could be solutions to this conflict, while those that have the ability and the power to actually find solutions do not care what is going on. That is the dilemma we are at. And we owe it to the audience and the people out there to disaggregate what the leaders may not be actually putting their mind to what they ought to. And that is why we have this particular discussion on Morning at NTV. We shall be going for a break shortly, but I want, when we return, to look at the diplomatic crisis that the attacks does create. In the West, such incidents would lead to a further escalation of tensions and opening up of other confrontations, but I know in Africa, when an embassy is attacked, we don't have to make a lot of noise about it. We understand our brothers are angry and they think that Uganda, Kenya, Rwanda, South Africa are responsible for what is happening in North Kivu, South Kivu, and Ituri. By the way, Ituri is also there seated, waiting for an escalation maybe. I don't know whether somebody hasn't meddled in that, but we hope somebody doesn't actually do it. Let's go for a break. When we return, this conversation will take on the diplomatic prong, full throttle. All right, welcome back. The debate behind the scenes is as elaborate as it is right here on air. I'm glad you're still with us. We are trying to find how the conflict in the Democratic Republic of Congo can come to an end within our offices as media. But before we went into the break, there was the assertion that all this lies on the shoulders of the leaders to understand that behind the scenes, the battle for resources for Congo is at the core of this problem. Are they complicit when it comes to the looting of the Democratic Republic of Congo? Well, your guess is as good as anybody else's. In studio, I have Timothy Kalyegira. I also have Dr. Allawi Ssemanda, as well as Hadijjah Natasha Sebunya, helping us understand what might be unclear on your side. We shall be entering the final bend of this. I want each of us to do a wrap on what Congo can be, especially if you had the opportunity, for example, to attend a summit, an extraordinary one for that matter, of the leaders. What would be your conversation with William Ruto? Let me begin with you, President Museveni and the rest of the leaders.
Speaking to them, I would, okay, being who I am, I would just wonder where to start, but I would just start with what I said earlier, this pattern of basically the thing that began with Kawamba in 1981, and that what you call Yoweri Museveni and his interventionist mentality that goes beyond Congo into Central African Republic, South Sudan, Somalia, these two entire students. and that foreign policy of theirs. Remember, they also did some fighting in Kisangani. And let me say, off air, I can tell you, I assume we're off air. And,
you are on air, sir.
Okay, but let me pretend I'm off air, and I will say that that there's also some unfinished business between Uganda and Rwanda, because there's another story. There's a time when President Museveni was supposed to have had this discussion over the closed border between Uganda and Rwanda, that trip he took by road to Kisoro. And there's a statement he made to the people of Kisoro. He said the conflict between Uganda and Rwanda involves internal matters of Rwanda. Very significant statement. He said it the way he normally speaks, casually, almost absent-mindedly, but that was a very important point, because there's also some kind of, there's also a people power of Rwanda that is based in Congo, some kind of the RNC and whatnot. And apart from this talk of those Congolese people, there's also this feeling of Congo is a real base for people, the Nyamwasa group, who have vowed to overthrow Kagame. So it's not just a question of the local people. There's also, basically, there's a kind of a Rwanda LRA inside Congo. So there's so many things going on. And it's a whole cocktail. And that's why we can't be a bit too hard on the Congolese government. It's a tough country to run.
We must understand Tshisekedi's discomfort.
Yes, in 1977, Shaba province in Congo, in Zaire, attempts to secede. President Amin sends troops to help bolster President Mobutu. And yes, the early years of the rebellion in 1965 that got Uganda involved. So it's always been that tradition. It's one of those Chad kinds of countries, or Ethiopia, always with endless rebellions.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Dr. Allawi.
Well, first of all, to President Kagame, if I met him, I would definitely tell him that as I understand his issues, and clearly any serious leadership, any serious country would not sit and see what he has described as a people power like in your neighborhood, regrouping, statecraft would have
Even
failed.
if my neighbor's bush has a snake in it, and I've noticed it slither through.
So what Kigali is doing, it is the right thing, but maybe doing it wrongly. Because we know that many people who are really have nothing to do are now suffering. I have seen many refugees really taking to streets. So that is the challenge. Then I would also tell President Tshisekedi that you cannot hide from your responsibility. He needs to be a good leader. He needs to accept that the problem is big. Him alone cannot dictate how this problem is going to be solved. He must accept M23 to be on table. To Ruto, President Museveni, I think they should tell Kagame, President Tshisekedi openly, accept or leave. Yes, because he's causing the suffering of people and the region citizens at the end. Yeah, so that's what I would say.
Do you agree? Maybe your own submission as we wrap this up, this particular conversation?
Yeah, I agree. I agree sort of. I think Congo is the best part of us. I think in terms of resources, in terms of music, in terms of like how, and in the next global race, because it's a new race for critical earth minerals, I think she deserves good neighbors. And I think we should solve this with less annexation and as amicably as possible. I do understand that Mr. Felix is not the best leader, and I do understand Kagame's position of the people power in FDC, but I also do think there's a bit of an exaggeration there, because I do think that the aggression is on both sides. M23 has done some human rights violations and has been involved in some things that are despicable in Congo, and I think it ought to owe up to that, and it's on both sides a bit, although I do understand its need to stand up for its people. But yeah, and I think I think, like Mr. Tim said, I think it's going to be the same thing that happened in 2016 and earlier. I think 2013 and 2016, when M23 advanced and took over, and then gradually it was told to retreat.
All right. Thank you, lady and gentlemen, for your submissions and perspective on this particular long-standing dilemma for the East African region. We do hope solutions can be found quickly. Talking about finding solutions, Uganda finds itself in a place of bother. Trump administration has decided that for the next 90 days since the inauguration, Washington is going to be reviewing how it deals with other countries in terms of the aid that it dispenses. And for Uganda, if I am to be very honest, we depend pretty heavily on aid that comes through for our health sector especially, and fears are that the repercussions might begin to rear their ugly head as early as now. Let me begin with you. What do you see this taking Uganda? Do we have a genuine opportunity now to begin to think about being self-sustaining in terms of our budget and planning processes?
I don't think Uganda has a chance at being self-sustaining. When the U.S. cut our aid, given our regulations with AHA, there was consequences, and the government was not able to fill in that gap. Yeah. I also do feel somebody described it really well. Aid is kind of like an addiction. It keeps people, it keeps a certain percentage of the population, a professional class, it keeps them occupied in this kind of activity, so they cannot generate meaningful, sustainable wealth to actually advance their countries. And I feel like we've been hooked on aid for a very, very long time. And I think it would be catastrophic. It would be such a blow if US was to withdraw the aid. However, what's interesting about Trump after the review, what's interesting about Trump is very good on private investment and entrepreneurship. So I think we'll still stand a chance there. But I think it would be catastrophic because I don't think our government can work without aid, and I think the consequences of trying to find money during this time and with how we're set up would be detrimental. Also, I think some of that aid, it goes to civil society, and I think in the place where we are, Dr. Businje Kabumba talked about it today. He said that, I mean, Muhoozi made such a claim on Twitter where he actually asked, he said that Besigye would be hanged, and there was not much international upheaval about that, and that was very worrying because in the past the US is very, on point with that. So the lack of civil society funding, all of that is very worrying for us. Okay. Yeah.
Maybe we've been left to our own devices,
which is bad. I don't think we stand a chance.
Do you see Mr. Trump rethinking that particular stance to allow for aid to continue, but also, since he has said the only genders that are recognizable, female and male, are we off the hook on AHA?
Let me first tell you, in 1976, George Washington, who is considered the founding father of the US, in his farewell speech, this is what he said: "No nation is to be trusted further than its bound interests, and no prudent statesman or politicians will venture to depart from it, unless both nations' interests happen to assimilate." So, I'm very happy with what President Trump has done. Not that I don't understand that many of our people are going to suffer, or we are going to suffer. I know about 2,000 doctors I have seen are going to be laid off. I know there are very many people in village who will not access medical services. It is going to be turmoil. I know very many people. But I really feel very happy that he has done this, because many times Africans have told us we are tired of colonialists, we are tired of this Western funding, Western influence into our politics. And exactly when they do this and say we are taking our taxpayers' money, we are up in arms. We are saying what should be happening. In 2020, at the start of COVID-19, I wrote a piece, "Beyond Coronavirus and Mask Diplomacy, East African community must get economic security right." And my argument was, like I can say now, that this gives us opportunity to see and sit and think about our countries, independently. And then ask yourself, we have a lot of money. Right now, people who are telling us that they are concerned, they are the ones earning lots of money. Can we see now governments in Africa, starting from Kampala, saying maybe let MPs take cut, let ministers take cut, such that we can fund these crucial things that are not going to be funded?
Timothy, pinch Dr. Allawi to wake up. MPs taking cuts. Really?
Yes.
MPs?
All Ugandans telling them that in this crisis, the ultimate measure of a man is determined in terms
to refund 500 million.
All right. Your rap, Mr. Kalyegira.
My rap is just that, we've, since the 1970s, Bob Marley, Marcus Garvey, and all these Frantz Fanon, we've been talking about American and Western imperialism, like he's saying. And when China began rising, we said, fine, this new non-judgmental country that invests in roads without lecturing us, Now, when they announced they're withdrawing their money, we feel the effect. I don't know if you remember a statement by the U.S. Embassy, was it 2021 or 2020, when they laid out some kind of a special section, it's still on the embassy website, explaining what America does in Uganda. So they explained all these things, you know, coffee, mother, and all these things. And the question was, everywhere you turn from wildlife conservation, it was what exactly does the Uganda government do? So we also remember a tweet or two by a certain chief of defense forces who gave the U.S. ambassador 72 hours to leave Uganda. Was it 48 hours? And, you know, there's all that bravado. So now we're coming to the humbling stage. Yes, so end of the day, all these things we've been doing over the last 25 years, the monitors being called bad papers and everything, pointing out all this waste of money and corruption, it's coming down to us. The Gavi funds, the Global Fund, 2005, 20 years ago. Now you're going to be cut to the bone, because one of the worrying things about this is that the American government funds a lot of our health, and these are really sensitive things, the TB and HIV. 3 months might seem, from a budget point of view, seems to be, okay, disruptive, inconvenient, but not too much of a problem. But remember, people on ARVs or TB, if you go for like 2 weeks or a week without those drugs, then there's this thing called drug resistance. In other words, we're in a very deadly situation now where if this money isn't dispersed, then we're going to see calls an alarm, like it was during the COVID-19 lockdown, for people to get their midterm benefits, as in personal money now being, even money from these circles, you know, to pay for ARVs, because you don't go for 2 weeks without ARVs, because then your life is in danger. So there's going to be a panic, and I hope then finally this causes this, what Kizza Besigye calls the indifferent elite of Uganda, to now panic enough and start putting pressure. And this idea of handing out, you know, bribery and all this patronage and the waste and such is cut down, supplementaries by State House and all this. It really, really builds up to crisis, and maybe with some immediate pain in the long term, we'll begin to see you must get your house in order.
Okay. Thank you very much. Timothy Kalyegira, international relations expert and seasoned commentator. Dr. Allawi Ssemanda, many thanks for making your submissions on Congo and, of course, what the Trump move means for Uganda. We're glad to have hosted you very first time, Madam Hadijjah Natasha Sebunya, Foreign Policy Analyst. It's been a pleasure having your company. Now, are you out there grappling with the waves of January? It could be only a few days away, but you have a chance to get some kamane. And as people say on the street, ojogemuko, joga with Absa is a conversation that's coming up next. Stay with us.